I want to start with a ring that a very serious auction house looked at, held up to the light, and honestly could not get excited about. Two little pear-shaped stones side by side on a thin gold band. One sapphire, one diamond, each a shade under a carat. The specialist himself told a newspaper it was a very ordinary ring, and they estimated it at about $13,000 to $20,000. It sold on the 24th of March, 2013, at the Ocenat auction house in Fontainebleau, France. The hammer fell at €730,000, something close to 949,000 American dollars, for a plain ring. Because in 1796, a young officer with almost no money bought it for a widow named Josephine, and later he was the Emperor of France. The real rule is narrower and far more useful. A ring is the only piece of jewellery we routinely engrave on the inside, not the outside, where the world can see it, the inside, against the skin, which means the whole history of a ring. The maker, the metal, the year, what somebody could not bear to leave unsaid, is written in the one place nobody in your family has ever looked. Ugly does not mean valuable. Ugly means unsorted. It means nobody has run their eye down the inside of that band yet. 15 homely, dark, unfashionable rings today. Some of them I am going to talk you straight out of, because I would rather you trust me at number 1. And every test I give you, you can do tonight, with a lamp, a $5 magnifier, and nothing sharper than a candle. One warning first, and it is not the one you have heard. Everybody says do not polish old jewellery. True enough. But with rings, the expensive mistake is a different one, and almost nobody names it. Do not resize it. A ring gets sized by cutting the back of the band out and soldering it shut. And on an old ring, that cut goes straight through the metal where the hallmarks live, where the maker's initials live, where the inscription lives. I once watched a jeweller size a Victorian band down 2 sizes and take the date letter clean off it. It fit beautifully afterward. It had also just become anonymous. So wear it on a chain, wear it on another finger, buy a $4 sizing insert. But do not let anybody cut that band until every mark on it has been read. All right, down we go. Number 15, the puzzle ring. 4 or 5 thin bands tangled together that fall apart the moment you take it off and will not go back, no matter how long you sit there swearing at it. Every family with a relative stationed overseas has one. And I will be honest right at the start, because if I flatter you now, you will not believe me at number 1. Almost every puzzle ring in America is a tourist piece from the 60s and 70s. $20 to $80 is the real world for most of them. But check this first, because it takes 11 seconds. Look inside the widest band for a carat mark. 14K, 18K, 585, 750. That is real gold, and the melt alone changes the conversation. Probably not treasure, but it costs nothing to look, and I would rather you practiced on something cheap. Number 14, the fraternal ring, the class ring, the heavy man's ring nobody wants, Masonic square and compasses, Shriner, Eastern Star, which was the ladies' one and is sitting in more American jewellery boxes than anybody realises, or a class ring from 1952 with a red glass stone. Honest version. Most are 10 carat, a little under 42% actual gold. Usually worth their weight and not much more. But 3 things move the needle. Read the inside of the shank for a maker. Balfour, Jostens, Herff-Jones are real American firms with real records. Look for 14 carat instead of 10. And look for enamel, because a Scottish Rite or shrine ring with intact coloured enamel sits in a real collector market, and that enamel is most of the price. Number 13. The ring your father made out of an airplane. In the Second World War, and again in Korea and Vietnam, servicemen made rings out of whatever was in front of them. Aluminum cut from a downed aircraft. Perspex from a canopy, which polishes up like glass. And the great American one, the coin ring. A $50 or a quarter dated before 1965, when our coins still held 90% silver, hammered around a spoon handle for weeks until the rim rolled over into a band. You can still read Part of Liberty on the good ones. American folk art, thrown away by the thousand because it looks like something a child made. The silver is the floor. The story is the ceiling. So keep the discharge papers with the ring, not in another box in another room. And on the legal side, turning circulating coins into jewellery is generally not the crime people assume, but the law cares about intent, and there are separate rules on melting cents and nickels. Ask somebody qualified before you sell a batch. Number 12. The heavy plain band with the stones sunk into it. Feel for this one rather than look at it. A wide solid band, and the stone is not up on prongs. It is sunk flush into the metal, level with the surface, often with a little star engraved radiating around it. That is a gypsy setting, sometimes called star setting, and it was everywhere in the 1880s and 90s. Built for men who worked with their hands, because a flush stone does not snag and cannot be knocked out. Your tell. Turn the band and look inside the shank with a magnifier. British ones often carry a full row of little punched marks. Not one number, a row. 4 or 5 stamps in a line means one is a date letter, and that ring can be dated to a single year, which is the difference between a heavy old band and a documented 1891 18-carat ring, number 11. 2 hands holding a heart. Every Irish-American family has one. The Claddagh. 2 hands, a heart, a crown. Named for a fishing village outside Galway, tied by legend to a goldsmith called Richard Joyce. Honest first. Yours is very probably 20th century, made for the American market, and worth its gold. Lovely thing. Not a fortune. But the Claddagh is the youngest member of a much older family. It is a fede ring. From the Italian, mani in fede, hands joined in faith. And those go back to Rome. The aristocrat of them is the gimmel ring. 2 or 3 separate hoops, hinged at the bottom, that swing apart and close back into one. A couple broke it apart at the betrothal, each kept a half, and put it back together at the wedding. So try, very gently, to see whether your band separates. If 2 hoops swing open on a hinge and 2 little hands clasp shut as you close them, stop, set it down carefully. That is a different object from a souvenir, and the Victoria and Albert Museum keeps them behind glass. Number 10. The ring that spells a word. Go find any old ring set with a row of small mismatched coloured stones, deliberately mismatched, which is exactly why it looks cheap and confused to a modern eye. A green one, a red one, a purple one, all in a line. Now read the first letter of each stone, left to right, the way you would read a sentence. Ruby, emerald, garnet, amethyst, ruby, diamond, R-E-G-A-R-D, regard, or diamond, emerald, amethyst, ruby, emerald, sapphire, topaz, dearest. They are called acrostic rings. They came out of Paris in the early 1800s. The Malario family, jewellers to the French court, usually get the credit, and stayed fashionable through the whole Victorian era. A man who could not say a thing out loud in 1840 could have it spelled in stones and slid onto a finger, and only 2 people on earth would ever know it was there. Go get it. Read it. Then tell me in the comments what your ring says. Number 9. And here I have to take something away from you, because I would rather you heard it from me. The Suffragette ring. Green, white and violet stones in a row. Usually peridot, a pearl and an amethyst. And every dealer listing on earth tells you the same thing, that those colours were a secret code. Green, white, violet. Give women the vote. It is a beautiful story. I have repeated it myself before I knew better. Beverly Cook, the curator responsible for the Suffragette collections at the Museum of London, has publicly said there is nothing in the historical record to support that acrostic. And when you go back to what the movement itself said in 1908, Emmeline Pethick Lawrence explaining the colours, she gives purple for dignity, white for purity, green for hope, purple, not violet, and no code at all. The colours were real, the movement was real. The acrostic looks very much like something the trade attached later, because it turns any Edwardian ring with 3 ordinary colours in it into political history. And that is worth rather more than peridot and pearl. And here is why I am not simply being a killjoy. There is a genuine suffragette jewel, documented, and hardly anybody has heard of it. The Holloway brooch, designed by Sylvia Pankhurst, given to women who actually served prison sentences at Holloway for the cause. A portcullis and a broad arrow. Real history, with names attached. Number 8. The snake. A gold serpent coiled twice around the finger, tail in its mouth, 2 tiny red or green eyes. To a modern eye, it sits somewhere between old-fashioned and faintly unpleasant, and down it goes to the bottom of the box. In 1839, Prince Albert gave Victoria her engagement ring, and it was a gold serpent set with an emerald, her birthstone. A snake swallowing its own tail is not a horror image. It is the oldest symbol we have for a thing without end. She wore it. And what the young queen wore, the English-speaking world wore for 60 years. So they are common, which is precisely why the good ones get missed. Get your magnifier onto the body and look at the scales. On a fine Victorian serpent, every scale was cut into the gold by hand with a graver. Slightly irregular, deliberate marks. And they run all the way around the underside, where nobody was ever going to look. On a cast copy, the scales are soft, rounded, identical, and they stop where the finger begins. If anything so far has made you want to go and open a drawer, that is the whole reason I do this. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it is the only thing that keeps these going. And let me be plain about what I am and what I am not. I am not a certified appraiser. This is not an appraisal, and nothing here is an insurance valuation or a legal opinion. Every figure I give you is what pieces have been reported to sell for, not a promise about anything in your house. Before you buy, sell, or insure anything, check with a certified appraiser and with the rules in your own state. One more, because it matters in the second half. Some antique materials, ivory, tortoiseshell, certain corals, are restricted or prohibited from sale under federal and state law, even when the object is genuinely 100 years old and even when it came from your own grandmother. Find out where you stand before you list anything. All right, the top 7. Number 7. The ring that opens. Pick up any old ring with a large flat top and press gently around the edge with a thumbnail. Every so often, one of them lifts. A hinged compartment ring. The trade calls them poison rings, which is very good for the trade and almost never true. I have handled a fair number and never once met one that had anything to do with poison. What they held was ordinary and far more touching. A curl of hair, a folded scrap of paper, a pellet of scent, because a Victorian street smelled like a Victorian street. The compartment is real. The drama is marketing. Your tells. Under magnification, a proper period hinge is a row of small interlocking knuckles with a pin through it, made as part of the ring. A modern reproduction has a crude flat hinge soldered on afterward, and original compartments are very often gilded inside, because the maker knew somebody would open it. If there is still hair or paper in there, leave it. That is part of the price. Number 6. The ring with an eye looking back at you. A small oval bezel and painted inside it, in watercolour, a single human eye. Just the eye, no face. Sometimes a wisp of cloud beside it, sometimes a border of tiny pearls, which stood for tears. On the 3rd of November, 1785, the Prince of Wales, the future George IV, wrote a desperate letter to a twice-widowed Catholic woman named Maria Fitzherbert, whom he was forbidden to marry. In the postscript, he told her he was sending her an eye. His own. Painted so small it would sit under a lapel, so that if anybody found it, they would have no idea whose it was. She married him in secret. She sent him hers. Half of fashionable Britain and America spent the next 50 years exchanging painted eyes. They are called lovers' eyes, and the reason you have never heard of them is that until recently almost nothing was written about them. The skier collection, shown by the Birmingham Museum of Art as the Look of Love, was the first major exhibition anywhere. The Philadelphia Museum of Art has them. So does the Metropolitan. Now, how to know what you hold. It is a painting, so under magnification you will see brushwork. Individual lashes laid in one at a time. A reproduction is printed, and printing under a loupe shows dots, and the cover should be a thick dome of rock crystal, not modern glass. One caution. That painting support is very often real ivory, which means federal and state law may apply to selling it, regardless of age and regardless of how it came to you. Get advice before you list it. Nobody in the trade will volunteer that. Number 5. The old man's ring with a stone you can carve. Heavy gold band, flat top, and set into it a slab of dark red carnelian or green bloodstone or banded sardonyx with somebody else's initials or a little crest cut into it. And that is exactly why it gets sold. It has another family's letters on it, but you are not looking at decoration. You are looking at a machine. A signet ring is a seal. Its whole job was to press a mark into wax and close a letter, and it worked because the design was cut into the stone backwards. Mirror image. So it came out the right way round in the wax, which gives you the best test in this video, and it takes 2 minutes. Light a candle. Let a little wax pool on a cold saucer and go from clear to cloudy, so it is soft but not hot. Press the ring in gently and lift it straight up. If the initials and the crest come out of that wax reading correctly, forwards, the way you would read them on paper, you are holding a real working seal, cut by a hand engraver who was paid a great deal for it. If the impression comes out backwards, you have a decorative signet made to look like one. Perfectly nice ring, completely different market. And do not have those old initials polished off and yours put on. That carving is the ring's identity. Number 4. The great big brassy ring from the war years. Enormous, chunky, rose or pink gold, which reads as cheap to a modern eye. A big scroll or a fan or a design like a tank track climbing over the finger, and a large stone in the middle in a colour you cannot quite name. That is retro. 1940 to about 1950, and it is the most consistently underestimated ring style in America, because everything about our current taste says small and delicate. Now the honest part. That big centre stone is very often furnace-grown. Chemically real, made by the ton in that period, and never sold as anything else. So do not build a number in your head around that stone. Build it around 3 other things. The gold, because these are heavy and often 14 or 18 carat. The design, because good retro is genuinely collected now. And the inside of the shank, because American retro is where real signed work turns up. Weigh it before you assume anything. Number 3. The ring that looks like a mistake somebody welded together. Big, asymmetrical, silver, hand-hammered. It might hold a lump of rough stone that was never faceted at all. It might span 2 or 3 fingers. It looks, and I say this with love, like something from a craft fair. It may be American studio jewelry, and it may be the quietest fortune in this entire video. After the war, a group of artists in Greenwich Village and San Francisco decided jewelry was sculpture, and that a ring did not have to be symmetrical or precious to be serious. Sam Kramer, Ed Weiner, Margaret DePatter, Betty Cook, and Art Smith. Born 1917, died 1982. Trained at Cooper Union, ran his own shop in Greenwich Village from 1946 to 1979. A black American designer whose work ran in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, and who made rings so ambitious that one of them, the cluster knuckles ring, around 1968, spans 3 fingers at once. The Brooklyn Museum mounted a show of his work in 2008, From the Village to Vogue. The Metropolitan has him. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston has him. He has a permanent place in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and here is the number that should stop you. The curator of that exhibition noted that a modest pair of his earrings, which once sold for $3 to $5, would now command something in the region of $1,500 to $2,000, and the important necklaces run into the tens of thousands. So turn it over and look for a signature, and expect it small, hand-stamped, slightly crooked, struck one at a time by the person who made the piece. Then look at the metal. Hand-raised silver carries faint planishing marks, tiny overlapping facets from a hammer, and the back is finished properly even though nobody sees it. If you find a name you do not know, write it down and look it up. Number 2. The plain worn gold band with writing inside it. Go and get your grandmother's wedding ring. The one so worn and so thin nobody has ever thought about it twice. Take it to the strongest lamp in the house and look at the inside. Because for 500 years, from the medieval period right through the 1800s, English and French couples exchanged what were called Posy rings. The word comes from poesy, poetry. A plain gold band, nothing on the outside at all, and inside, engraved against the skin, one line. Love is the bond of peace, not value but virtue. Be true till death, a true friend's gift. Nobody else was ever meant to see it. That is the entire point of the object. She knew it was there. He knew it was there. And for 400 years it went around a finger doing its quiet work. The British Museum holds them. So does the London Museum. There was an exhibition drawn from the Griffin collection titled I Like My Choice. Itself a Posy taken off one of the rings. And the standard reference is still Joan Evans, English Posies and Posy Rings, Oxford, 1931. What to look for? The band is plain, D-shaped in section, often surprisingly thin from wear. The script inside will be italic or old cursive and may be genuinely hard to read. Photograph it and enlarge it on your phone rather than squinting. Spelling will be irregular. and there is often a maker's mark, a tiny set of initials in a punch, beside the inscription. A medieval one found in an English field went to Noonan's in Mayfair in the spring of 2025, with an estimate in the thousands of pounds, and a good 17th century English example changes hands in the low five figures. I do not say that to make you dream. I say it because the object we are describing is a plain worn gold band. And the only reason anybody ever knows it is anything is that somebody once held it up to a lamp. Number 1, which is not a kind of ring at all, and I want to tell you honestly why. Every video like this one ends by telling you to hunt for a magic word stamped in the metal, find the little signature, and you are rich. I will not do that to you, because the trade fakes those signatures constantly, and because it is not true. Go back to where we started. The auction house valued that ring at $13,000 to $20,000, and they were not being foolish. That is what the object is worth as an object. They said as much publicly. Their estimate was the market value of the ring minus the Napoleon and Josephine of it, and it was not their job to tell bidders what to pay for history. The room decided that. $949,000 at the hammer. Over $1 million with the commission, for a ring valued at $20,000. So here is number 1, and it is the only thing on this list that applies to every ring in your house. The paper is the treasure, not the stone, the paper. The letter that mentions it, the photograph where she is wearing it, the receipt from the jeweller in town, the fitted box with a shop name inside the lid, the line in a will. Your aunt's handwriting on the back of a snapshot. 2 rings can be physically identical, and the one with a documented human being attached can be worth many times the other. That is not sentiment. That is how the auction market has priced things for 200 years. And it is the one form of value you can still create at home, this weekend, for free. So do this. Go through the box with the oldest person in your family who will still sit with you and write down what they say. Whose it was. Who gave it. What year, roughly. Put that paper in the box with the ring and put a date and your name on it. Because in 30 years, when somebody opens that box, your handwriting is going to be the provenance. So, read the inside of every band. Do not have anything resized until you have. Do not polish an inscription. Do not grind old initials off a signet. Do not tip out what is inside a compartment ring, and never accept one round number for the whole box. Photograph each ring separately, on plain paper, with a ruler beside it. First, the easy one. Go find a ring with mismatched coloured stones in a row and read me the first letters. Tell me what your ring says. I have a feeling there are words sitting in drawers all over this country that nobody has read in 100 years. And second, argue with me about the Suffragette ring. Some of you were told that story by a dealer you trust, or by your mother, and I have just told you a curator at the Museum of London says the record does not support it. I would rather be corrected in public than repeat something pretty that is not true. So if you know better, say so. Because the truth underneath all 15 is the same, and it is not really about money. A ring is the only thing we own that gets engraved on the side nobody sees. Somebody chose those words knowing one person would ever read them, and then wore them against the skin for 50 years. They are still in there. The only thing that has ever changed is whether anyone in the room thought to look.